If you're struggling to get real estate deals closed or not seeing the results that you expect, there might be something that you're missing. In this video, we're breaking down a wholesale deal that we made $12,843, but it wasn't smooth sailing. From using TikTok ads in order to find the seller, to dealing with evictions and price reductions, this deal had plenty of twists and turns. But you definitely want to watch it because you're going to learn finally what it's going to take in order to get a deal from beginning to the end, closed, and money in your pocket. All right, everybody, I'm here with my good friend and part of the National Property Buyer team, Dave Ludena.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here.
You know, a lot of times on these particular deal case studies, they don't really walk through all the nitty-gritty details of the entire deal from beginning to end. So the purpose here is to walk through everything so that you know exactly not only, you know, the details about the deal, but how it all went down and everything else. And so I have this massive Google Doc here that we're going to walk through everything. So this particular property here was in Aurora, Missouri, 1102 South Rinker Avenue. Had you ever even heard of Aurora, Missouri before this lead came in?
No, not until I saw it on this lead sheet. Which is the interesting thing about this business, because on a daily basis, it seems we're discovering new uncharted areas in the United States, at least for me. Yeah.
Well, don't worry. This wasn't on your list of vacation spots, right? Aurora, Missouri.
And it still isn't.
Okay.
Although it seems like nice people, but
it seems like a nice, yeah. And 7,500 population size, which is quite small. That's about the size of a few blocks here in Broward County. All right. So just for context sake, this Aurora, Missouri is located right here between Kansas City, between St. Louis, Missouri, and Memphis in this particular area. And if I click on the map, you should be able to see the map, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Yep. So here you can see as we zoom in, it's just a small town. You know, there's a bunch of little small towns here, and then as we come through here, this is the Zillow. So the Zillow, which was interesting because the Zillow, and we'll get into this in a second. This is a Zillow listing. The Zillow only showed a value of $78,000, and I'm not sure if that was the case when we first looked at the deal. It could have been maybe because once it's sold, then maybe they changed the value. Do you remember if that was the case or no?
No, I think it was actually, and this obviously his estimates are his estimates. They're sometimes wrong. I believe it was actually low to begin with, which always gives you a little bit of pause when you're first looking at a deal, because you're like, oh, how far off are we? Because they had this under contract at 60. But to answer your question, no, that was there like that.
Okay, that was there like that. And then on this particular, when we looked at Zillow, there was active inventory. So one of the things we look at is in any small town is, hey, is there a sign of activity or life in that particular area? So in this particular town, there were active listings. Now, in this particular case, this is not historical. This is now when I pulled it up, but it's pretty much about the same when we looked at it. For houses under 400,000, there were 34 active listings. And then we also look at pending. So, you know, if we toggle on the pending, we can see there's a total of 46. So that means there's a total of 46 active properties, and then only there's a total of 46 total inventory, and then 34 are active. That means that the difference is how many are pending. So we had 26% pending, which is a good number. You know, it's kind of like, you know, at least a nice baseline of a number. And then when looking at solds over the last 12 months, we can see that, oh, there's activity. So the bottom line is the first layer of whether or not this is a viable lead or not is just looking at Zillow and seeing if there's activity or anything going on there. And then now this is what I definitely want to walk through, because this is when the deal was first submitted and the information that was given to us. So the way that this was submitted is that this came from a TikTok ad for motivated sellers. This came through one of our partners. So we set up TikTok ads, Facebook, and Google for our partners. They run them. We look over their shoulder and we help them sell the deals. So this is great. And we get to help a lot of people that are looking for their first deal. So we flood them with leads, and then we look over their shoulder to make sure that we can get deals across the goal line. So I've removed the client and the seller information for privacy purposes. So here is the seller situation. So and this is the thing I wanted to discuss, because right now the price came in at 60,000. That's what they put on the contract. and they thought that the end value was 115 to 120. Now we're going to go through the values, but at the time, um, was there anything? I think you were okay with the values, but you thought that the contract price was a little bit too high, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually pulling it up myself here real quick. But yes, that I knew that we were a little bit, and I spoke with our client on that who submitted it and said we're going to have to get a haircut on that, which we did. But that's one of the benefits of having, you know, what our team does, obviously, is we can renegotiate on their behalf, especially if they're newer. That's a daunting thing sometimes. So,
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't know that. Did you or them negotiate with the seller?
oh, I did.
Okay,
I
okay. So you were the bad
was
guy.
the better. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I was the good guy. I'm always the good guy. I got to tell them what my underwriting department has said. Yeah.
So tell me about that. Like, what? Just I know we're going back in the this was about 30 days ago, but maybe how did you approach that? Like, what was the positioning? Because I was looking at the cover, here. This is from our CRM. So our CRM, when a call is made through the CRM, they do a summary of the call, which I think this is something new. I thought it was pretty cool to get that. And
Yep.
so you talked to them. You didn't negotiate the price on the first call you made with them, right?
No, I knew it was going to come. And so what I did on the first call, what we always do on the first call is just call and introduce ourselves as a transaction coordinator. We're going to be their point of contact as we get this thing through, our due diligence process to the closing. And we set up an expectation that we're going to need access to the property to have obviously our buyers walk through. And the way we present that, of course, is our either funding partner or our contractors, whatever the case is. But I knew we'd have to get that. Now, what I wanted to do was once I got a buyer through the property,
Yeah.
to really understand, because virtually we sometimes only hear what they tell us and see some pictures. In this case, I'd yet to see the pictures. He hadn't
Yeah.
yet gotten pictures to us. So I didn't feel like I really had a great basis to go and get that reduction yet.
So
I
you,
wanted
you
to,
felt you felt that a reduction was probably going to be necessary, but you weren't ready to take out your sledgehammer or and do that just yet.
yeah, I wanted to have a basis for conversation on that.
Yeah.
And so in this case, I waited till I get the pictures. And I want to say, actually, I waited until I actually spoke with the buyer. I still put it out at the price that we were hoping to get. And we'll talk about that,
Yeah, because I
obviously.
see here you got the pictures now the pictures came from the owner, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I see you got the pictures from the owner. And then now typically, so well, just to clarify, with the pictures, typically if the owner is not able to provide, then we do home jab. But the easiest way is just if we can get the owner to take photos of the property, right?
Yeah, and even initially, and as you know, sometimes the pictures aren't super great, but it's at least something so we can, number one, establish, what the deal really is that we've got, and two, we can start doing some marketing with it. If we need better pictures, sometimes we'll coach them to do so, and in some cases, like you said, we'll hire a third-party vendor like HomeJab to go do it.
Now, on this, just to go back real quick, the particular seller situation was that they were not living at the property. It was a tenant occupied property, right?
Yep.
And what was the reasoning for them wanting to sell the property? Do you remember?
Yeah, so they've had it for a while. They actually had a daughter going to college, and so nice parents that they are, they wanted to actually pay for her college.
Oh,
That's what this sale was about.
okay.
And truthfully, they were also just tired of being landlords, but that wasn't a huge, huge pain point, at least in the initial conversations. That kind of came out later on in
Hmm.
our kind of discussions.
Got it. And then so then now you got the photos of the property, and then you had made a comment um to them. These are the deals that you had looked at. So the initial price that they put on the contract was for
60.
60,000. They thought it was worth 115 to 120. And then you made a comment here about these two properties, which I'm going to show on the screen, as being comparable. So this one was one that was a 2-1 that was purchased for 50, and then it rehabbed and sold for 124.
Mhm.
And then you had also another deal here that was another 2-1 that sold for 40-ish, right? And
And
then, huh?
yeah, an investor picked it up for 40.
Got it. So the other one, the investor paid 50. This one they paid 40. And then you had another one, which was at the time, I don't know if you know, this was at the time was active, but now it's pending. This is a 2-1 that was active at the time. And then when I just looked at it, and now it shows pending. So in other words, what you just to clarify, what you were thinking was, hey, these guys paid, they had paid 40 and one paid 50, so that you're thinking that the price was going to have to be around that number from
Mhm.
us, right? To get it cheap enough, right?
Right.
And then now, so then you put the property on investor lift, right? Was that the next step?
Yeah.
And but at the time you put it on investor lift, you did not you did not get a price reduction as of yet.
Yeah, one other thing too, Chris, to bring up, this was actually in a non-disclosure state. So that's why I was just when I put sold for
Mhm.
40-ish, sold for 50-ish. Um, One of the challenges, especially when you're brand new, is when you got a state like Texas, Missouri,
Yeah.
certain states that don't show sold prices. Um, there's a little bit of a challenge to know, okay, really, what is this worth? And some of the things that we would do is look to see when it went pending, as it was priced through the history of the price history, when it went pending, how soon it went pending after
Mm.
that latest price drop. And then generally that's a pretty good indication that it may be sold for right around there, or at least lower than that in this
Right.
market.
That makes sense. Okay, good point. So you put it on investor lift. Did you start getting activity right away?
You know what? Let me look.
Okay.
It's hard to remember last month, let alone or yesterday.
It's hard to remember last week, let alone last month.
Yeah, so it looks like first marketing campaign and not a lot of interest, I'll tell you, because being the rural spot that it
Yeah.
was, we didn't get a ton of interest. So everybody who did respond, I called them up and tried to see if there was something there as far as a real buyer. And in this case, the buyer who actually did buy it was the first guy who did respond.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And then that was through the text messaging campaigns, right?
That one was through, we did both text and email.
Okay.
Uh, I can't see where he came from, but it was one of the two. Yeah.
And then these were the photos. So the property, it doesn't seem like the property it wasn't in bad shape.
Yeah, well, what he did was he actually sent a video, which was helpful. It's not easy to post videos like the stills of the video, but in the video, you see that the property actually was okay. Wasn't as like exterior wasn't so bad. Interior, there was obviously some things that still had to be done, but it wasn't in bad shape. It was definitely a livable property, a
Yeah.
landlord situation, perfect. Our buyer, interestingly enough, is actually going to flip it. He's not going to be a landlord. He's going to
Oh,
flip it.
interesting. So he's going to flip it. Do you know, did the buyer live in Aurora or they live somewhere else?
Yeah, no, they lived in Aurora.
Okay, interesting. Okay. We may have to go visit him. So then now, there was a conversation you had with Eric, and I see that you can see the history, the summary points here, because uh, you had to show the property. So it seemed like one of the was a what was the issue with the tenants, or what did you have to dance around with the tenants?
So a lot of times what will happen when a landlord is looking to sell a property, they don't want to rock the boat with the tenant because then things might get hairy. Maybe they stop paying, maybe they
Yeah,
become problematic, et cetera. So a lot of times you'll hear landlords say, listen, until I know that we're 100% going to close on this,
yeah.
let's just kind of not rock the boat. So how we typically do that is say, hey, not a problem. Just prepare the tenants that we've got. You're going to have somebody come to the property just to do some estimates of repairs that you're considering.
Got it. Okay. So that was that conversation, prepping that up. Now you guys talked about eviction notice. Is that because the buyer bought the property with the tenants or it had to be vacant?
Yeah. So the way, because this is AI doing that summary, he used the word eviction because
Okay.
technically they were month to month. So there wasn't really an eviction. It was more of a notice.
Got
Okay.
it.
But he
Okay.
used the word eviction.
And then I think let's see, you I said agent instructed Mark to play dumb if asked about buying the property. I love how AI just, interpreted that. So,
Mark is the buyer. Yeah.
okay, Mark is the buyer. Okay, got it.
So
So
that's another
so
point too, not to
yeah,
cut you off this, but also number one, and this is again the benefit of what our clients get with us is, you know, getting the property under contract, though that's got its own challenges.
yeah,
Uh, one of the things that getting a lot of leads in front of them that gives them while they're developing skills, and even for more advanced people too, it gives you. You don't have to be super great at sales if you got a lot of leads coming through, but when you get a deal under contract, the other part of it, the dispo, that's a challenge sometimes because here it does show up on the deal. And
yeah,
in this case, uh, with buyers, just because somebody raises their hand and says they're interested doesn't mean that's a real buyer. So we have to vet these buyers, especially if we've got a limited number of walkthrough opportunities. So before Mark, my buyer, goes through, number one, we make sure that they're qualified to do so by they have the funds,
hmm,
a proof of funds from them. Two, we also make sure that, I get an understanding of what they've been doing, that they're true buyers, that they're just not looky-loos or other wholesalers
yeah,
to be buyers, right?
yeah.
The data chainer. So Mark, we vetted him, and so he was good to go, and we trained him. He's had some limited exposure with other wholesalers, so I just made sure that he understood. Look, when you go talk to the seller, don't tell them that you're the buyer, right? You're working with us. We
Yeah.
train them how they present themselves so that there's no confusion. And again, it's not because we're dancing in the shadows as wholesalers. We just don't want to introduce static
Yeah.
to the conversation. So he went in as our partner.
Got it. Okay, perfect. And also just to clarify, to what you said is that, in a situation like this, we can't have 15 people going through the property. So we
Right.
have a limited opportunities. We want to make sure that we vet those opportunities so that we get the right people in. Um, and then now, there was a August 16th, there was a conversation about eviction, or were the tenants leaving, or what was the situation there? Or maybe that's just a misinterpretation of what happened. What was the situation?
Yeah, so there started to become, I could sense in the conversation, the seller was a little hesitant on how things were going to progress with the tenant. And he wasn't sure what the laws as far as the days of notice, et cetera,
Yeah,
was. So I suggested, look, what do they pay per month? It's about $800. I said, well, why don't you just offer them cash for keys so that they don't, so it's an incentive, right? And what do you call it? Honey, right?
right.
Honey is more than vinegar. And if you just told them, hey, you got to be out, they can do some things like drag their feet, and then maybe now there is some kind of legal action you got to take, and that could take time. Two, it's not unheard of where tenants trash a property on their way out, and that could skew the deal, right? So I said, why don't you just offer them, hey, look, I'll give you $800 if you leave by X date. And they complied. They liked that idea.
Because and that was because did the buyer at that point, because this is before you, I'm not sure, did the buyer say, hey, I'll take the property, but the tenants have to be out? Is that what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. He
Okay.
wanted to this out.
Got it. So let's go back to that point, because a lot of times people ask, okay, what do I do with the property if there's tenants or there's issues or whatever? And be curious to know what your take is. And generally, what I tell students is you put the property in the contract, and then it's the buyer who dictates that, because the buyer could say, oh, I don't care. I'm not going to rehab it for another 3 months. They can stay there. Or a buyer could say, no, I need the tenants out before closing. And then at that point is when you approach that issue. Would you agree with that, or any point of difference on your thought process on that?
No, 100% agree with that. The only difference is if they were actually on a lease, there is no
Right.
there you either and again, a lease can be broken by the tenant if they want to, if
You can
both,
bribe them.
right, then that's where the keys come in. They were
Right.
month to month, but your tactic is exactly the way that I do it too.
Okay. And then now you then so you got an offer from the buyer. I have to assume you got an offer from the buyer. The offer was less, right, than we had it on the contract for. Or actually not walk me through the numbers because the original contract was 60 and then eventually you got the reduced to 51. So the buyer's offer gave us a little bit of money, but not really that much. Is that what
Yeah,
happened?
exactly. So he went in there, and again, this is one of the things you want to get buyer feedback.
Yeah.
And he said, "Look, I like the property, but the number just doesn't really work." We had it again at 69,000 starting. So we ended up at 65 is the number he said he could take it at. And that's what I asked him. I said, all right, well, listen, I don't know how much wiggle room we've got, but I mean, what number would you take this at? And
Yeah.
so he said 65. And I said, well, okay, well, I'm not sure we can do that, but let me go talk to, our owner, you, Cris. Although I didn't really talk, and just see if that's something we can do. But if we could get it 65, you're ready to move forward today. He said, yeah. So then I went back to the seller and I renegotiated based on everything that the buyer had told me. So I was just writing down the things that the buyer told me, all the bad.
Yeah. Got it.
I and I went back and renegotiated at 51,000 and some change. The reason why we're doing, yeah, 51,357. But then because we want them to sweeten the deal to get the tenants out, I actually gave them 800 bucks. So if it wasn't for that, we would have made 800 bucks more on our assignment fee,
Got it.
but
Okay.
the deal worked.
Got it. And then do you remember if the owner was terribly upset or he was just understanding of the situation to a certain degree, or how was his demeanor when you had that conversation with him?
So he was actually the guy that I spoke with mostly, and he was actually a pretty easy guy to talk to. His wife is
Oh,
the real decision maker, though.
got it.
So she wasn't available when I was talking, so I just spoke with him
Hmm.
and explained the situation. And when I think I was down to 50, yeah, like yeah, 51. I gave him that 51,000.
Right.
He said, "Well, I got to talk to my wife." And I said, "Absolutely, go talk to her." And he did. He called me back and he said, "Okay, we would do that, but you take care of the tenants." So that's now I'm remembering. So we hadn't had the conversation yet of getting the tenants out necessarily, I don't believe. Because I think this was actually, if we're going chronologically,
Yeah.
this might have been after or before when we
Got
made
it.
the,
Okay.
and then we discussed the 800 bucks. But he said, because I wanted him to take the tenants out. And
Yeah.
he said, all right, you guys will do the price, but you take care of the tenants. And then
Got it.
that's when I suggested, okay, let's do that. And we'll give $800 to get them out.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And then once we got the agreement signed and you sent it to the title company, how did you find the title company? Who,
Yeah. So, a lot of times I'll just ask the buyer if they've worked with, if they've been doing deals, they've got a title company. So I'm not against going to a title company that they're familiar with and they're comfortable with, especially because the 3,000, I think, is what we use here, $2,500 for EMD,
Mhm.
non-refundable. That was our first dance together, and sometimes they're a little bit nervous to send that directly to us. So
Yeah.
if I have them deposit in a title company they're accustomed to using, that makes less static. But also, it's easy just to call that title company, ask them if they're familiar with assignments, if they've worked with wholesalers. One of the things you also want to ask title companies, because it's a cash deal, can they do separate HUDs or settlement statements for cash and buyer, or sorry, for buyer and seller. That way, our assignment fee is seen on the buyer side, not the seller side. Again, it's not a deal breaker if it can't happen
Yeah.
that way. It makes things a little easier at closing date.
I saw that. I saw that there were two HUDs. And then did you call the title company after he said, "Hey, this is who I use," and then ask him if they did assignments and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then just for clarity's sake, you said EMD, so the contract that was with the seller, I think just had nominal EMD on there like $100. And so then we had the buyer put up the one who's purchasing the property through the assignment, he put up $2,500. So he's the one that puts up the money. The only money that our clients had at stake were the marketing money that they were using to run the ads.
Yep.
Now there were some issues that came up. I don't know what these are here. There was a glycol line under pressure
Yeah.
issue at work?
Yeah, that was just kind of like the when I called and say, "Hey, Eric, how are you doing? How was your weekend?"
Oh,
or whatever. So he was just talking about what was going on at work there.
got it. Okay. And then, but now toward the end, wasn't there some I think our closing got delayed for by a couple days, right? What happened there? Why did it get delayed?
So the tenants are um, an interesting couple in the sense of, um, and this is why I think Eric, the seller, was having some nervousness about talking to them because I think they're very recreational drinkers, kind of a thing.
Okay, got it. I like that. I like the way you phrased that. Recreational drinkers.
Maybe
Instead of
career,
saying,
maybe career.
instead of telling somebody like, what do you do on the weekend? I get blasted out of my mind. You're like, I'm a slightly aggressive recreational drinker on the weekend.
So the tenant had tried to reach me a couple times, and every time I reached him, I
Yeah,
tried again some phone tag. He wanted to just ensure that this money was coming to him because he's like, hey, I've got nowhere to go, come this date. He was supposed to be out. We were going to close on, it was a Friday, and that didn't happen. Our buyer went to do a walkthrough. There was still stuff in there. So we gave them through the weekend, and this was Labor Day weekend. So we actually had an extra day,
right.
which ultimately everything worked out. But that was kind of the question mark was, were they really going to be out on time?
Got
And
it.
his message to me that on my voicemail, the tenant was, hey, I need this money up front so I can, go get a hotel.
Right.
There's a little lesson here too. People will cry and lie. If he didn't have money, what was he going to do if the house wasn't sold? He'd have to pay rent the next month anyways, right? So he was just
Yeah.
trying to get money up front. We didn't give him the money up front. You never want to do that
Yeah.
because you'll never see it again if things don't work out. So uh, everything did work out. He did get out. He's got his money. Seller's happy, buyer's happy,
And
tenant on this.
who met with him and gave him his money, Eric?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So he and then I think that yeah, that was the end of it. And then at the end of the day, it was $800, and I think I had here um with the amount so the total uh purchase price was 52,157, and then looks like the buyer got a hard money loan, maybe. But the total assignment fee was 6421 times two because we split that with our partner. For this particular transaction, it's a small town, so somebody could have gotten this lead and said, "Oh no, that's not a deal," and at the end, it's a lost opportunity. But also, too, you were instrumental in getting the reduction, right? Because if we didn't have a reduction on that, then yeah, we would have made some money, but definitely not anywhere near as much as it could have been made. I think that a lot of times people, everybody's always focused in this business on the front end, meaning, oh, I got to get leads, I got to get leads, I got to get leads. But there's a whole lot of other work that happens on the back end of the business to get that deal closed, and a lot of people don't really realize that. So I don't know if you might want to speak on that particular item because that's what you were involved. I mean, obviously you know both sides of the business, but this is what you're involved with. Any tips and suggestions for people based on what happens after you get the deal?
Yeah. Well, send them to us.
Yes. Then-
You know, in this particular case, what was really nice is because for our particular client, this was their first deal. I think was this their first real
Yeah,
estate.
yeah, yeah. This is the first one. Yeah.
And recently we had another client. That was his very first deal. I think you did a case study on that
Yeah,
one
with
too.
Gene.
He made no, the one in Sacramento.
Oh
Guy named-
yes, Jared. Yeah, that's right. You were involved with Jared. I gotta tell you, we gotta do another recap on Jared. So we're gonna have to do another video just on that one there. But yeah. So the back end, there's a lot of nuances that come with the back end, and I think that there's a benefit to somebody focusing on the front end first, getting really great at acquisitions and putting contracts down, and then little by little learning the other aspects of the business, right? So.
because I think what happens too, and when you're newer, you may not be thinking in these terms, but as you should, as you get more mature in this business, look at certain KPIs. And so cost per lead is one thing. And if you're getting a bunch of leads, that's great. But then your cost per deal is also an important number to look at too. And so if you're getting all these leads up front and you are putting them on a contract, and maybe not at the right price, or there is hair on the deal that makes it die, well, then, it's frustrating. And this
Yeah.
still does happen even with, experienced investors, wholesalers, but, less so because we know how to navigate some of the more difficult
Yeah.
conversations, some of the difficult situations that might arise, whether it's property, tenants, title issues, et cetera. So I think that when you've got, the acquisition, and that's why it is two different departments, really. I mean, a lot of solopreneurs will do both,
Yeah.
but it's still two different departments. Getting it is one thing, dispo is another thing, and they're both equally hard or challenging, I should say.
Yeah.
But it's a rewarding business if you know what you're doing, and it's cool that we've got people who see us as part of their team in order to get them from, a 50-yard line all the way to the
All
end
the way
zone.
to the end. Yeah, 100%. I'll leave it with this because there's three parts. There's the putting it in the contract, there's the selling of the deal, and then there's a transaction coordination aspect of it. And at any one point, the deal can fall apart, right? So you may have it on the contract, but then if you don't analyze it, or maybe you don't get the right price reduction, etc., then it's a missed opportunity. So we got a whole more of case studies that we got to get done as well. The one in Sacramento and a few others as well. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing exactly what happened and how it went down. And for those of you that are interested, there's a link in the description to go ahead and check out our partner program. Just click on that link and reach out to us, or you can watch one of the videos that'll pop up here or there that'll detail for you specifically the entire model step by step, so that way you know exactly how this model works, how you can do deals nationwide, and maybe just maybe we could help you close some deals as well.